So we see the method of the control. In fact, from some of the documents I've seen in research, this is a system of corruption. They like to get the entire government, different power structures, involved in a huge cover-up, because then later it can also be used to blackmail. And that's what Special Forces commanders and many others that we've talked to who've worked on this have said, is that the North Vietnamese are blackmailing the federal government to this day, because the federal government made that move to not get our troops out, because they decided, okay, we'll pull out of there. We're done. We don't want the North, who's taken over the South, to be able to use us as a blue chip against us. We'll just call these troops expendable hardware. And the communists are sitting there going, well, this is perfect. We'll keep them, and then they'll go along with the cover-up, and then we've always got this ace in the hole.
Exactly. That's right. And anybody in the American government that talks is simply out of the government. They go from being a high official to a nobody. So this is how the government gets away with its lies. And, of course, the American people, or so many of them, are just gullible. They're just terribly gullible. And they have this sort of faith and trust in government that Americans didn't used to have. I blame that on Franklin Roosevelt, who, in the Great Depression, trying to rally people, gave them the idea, which they've had ever since, that the government is their protector.
And it's going to put a chicken in every pot.
Yeah, and keep them safe, you see. And as we've talked about many times on your program, this was the line of the Bush-Cheney regime, that, we're going to take away all your civil liberties and destroy the Constitution in order to make you safe. Terrorists. And people just are gullible, and they fall for it. And so it's not really hard for government to pull off things like 9/11, because all it has to do is give some kind of explanation, and people believe it. They don't say, hey, the government did this. That's not their first thought. It never enters their head. It's always, some tiny group of Muslims who can't even fly airplanes. They did. So, but perhaps, to repeat myself, the fact that this story is now getting out and getting some attention about the POWs, because that really touches at the heart of American patriotism, doesn't it? I mean, that really touches the flag wavers, the people who want to kill them over there before they come over here. It really cuts to the very heart of the most conservative people, the people who are most willing to go to war to achieve whatever the government says. If it turns out that the government has actually abandoned its own soldiers, then it could possibly shake some of those people. It could possibly cause more skepticism among the public, and it could lead to the unraveling of other massive lies and conspiracies.
Well, Dr. Paul Roberts, let me expand on that, because from my research, and I mean, it's on record this happened, there was over 20,000 U.S. troops in German POW camps that were grabbed by the Russians. And by then, Roosevelt had died, and Harry Truman, said, Stalin's our ally, and basically, we're not going to get in a fight with him. They gave him half of Eastern Europe. They gave him half of Germany. That's the thing that made, and now documents have come out on this, that's what caused Patton to have a complete conniption fit. And so they killed him. And so this has been a policy for a while, that troops are just expendable animals, as Henry Kissinger said. And so this goes back even to the greatest generation. And I would challenge, all these Pulitzer Prize-winning people to go look into that, because that's hidden in plain view as well.
Yes, I think you're right. The people, Frederick von Hayek, in his book, The Road to Serfdom, he has a chapter, Why the Worst Always Get on Top. And that goes not just for totalitarian systems, but for democracies. The worst rise to the top. And we certainly have the worst people in the country in Washington. That's where the worst people are. And these kinds of people don't have compunction. They don't have shame. They're not moral. They have ruthless agendas that feature themselves. And that is why democracy itself is no protection from a ruthless government.
Well, that's why you've got to have the republic where the minority as well as the majority is protected. And I've done a general research of history. I don't claim to be a historian, but I read history books almost every day as my entertainment. That's how I actually got informed as an adolescent and a teenager, was because I happened to pick up history as a form of entertainment, not knowing I was educating myself on the way the world works. But really studying our founding fathers, they weren't perfect, but there was Western expansion. They wanted to be left alone by the bigger mafia, the crown, to build their own little systems. And so they created a system to restrain the avarice of king rats, of the strong men. And that's why this country produced half the world's wealth, only 4% of the population. So one of the few times in history, the flower of the Renaissance, and now watching that being drugged down and being used as the engine of world tyranny, it's very frustrating.
Yes, it is very frustrating. But if we can just keep making people aware that every American government since Nixon has covered up the abandonment of American prisoners of war. And, we have this definitely proved in the case of Vietnam, and may well be proved in the case of the World War II prisoners. This should help bring the sort of most gullible, flag-waving patriots to some realization that the government isn't trustworthy and it doesn't look after anyone's interests, not even the soldiers that are out there giving up their lives and limbs.
Well, what about this issue? They asked the troops to torture. They asked them to execute people in Afghanistan illegally, which then corrupts them. And then every time it comes out, like Abu Ghraib in Iraq, they then prosecute the people who on record were following the White House memos and orders. So it's not just that you'll be left behind, it's that you'll be used up and then scapegoated later because there's no honor among these thieves that run the system.
That's exactly right. I don't know why anyone who was aware would have anything to do with the military. I don't know why anyone would join. I can't understand why the students at West Point and Annapolis and the Air Force Academy just don't get up en masse and walk out, because they're going to be betrayed too. Or they're going to be used for evil and then betrayed. And even if you don't want to be, you're forced to go along with it, or your career is destroyed.
But that's my point, that there's a systematic evil throughout history. We see Hitler killing his brown shirts that brought him to power. We see things that happen in every society. It's like a tropism. It's a pathology in corrupt elites that their greatest glee is hanging their own attack dogs out to dry. Because if I was one of these evil people, but I guess I'm not evil, so I can't understand it, I would at least defend my henchmen and my servants to have that servant group, my Praetorian. But no, they treat their Praetorian like toilet paper.
That's right, because they learned from the Romans that the Praetorian can take over the ruler. So Stalin ends up killing his own heads of his secret police and his own colleagues in the Politburo, because they know that no one has any integrity or morality, and that they're all fair game for one another. So whoever strikes first and gets rid of the others is the survivor. And that's how the system ends up eating itself. But of course, we don't really care if the evil people eat each other up. What we're worried about is that how they're destroying the rest of us who are not among their ranks. And this is the fact that the American people need to wake up to, and that you keep telling them about every day.
Well, that's another issue. I mean, I've seen your transformation and research the last 5, 6 years we've been talking to you, from saying they're just a bunch of nuts, a bunch of crooks, they don't know what they're doing, to saying, no, this is clearly by design because all the evidence shows it is. I want to briefly talk about the economy with you and all these headlines. Is Europe heading for a meltdown? Just on and on and on, what's happening worldwide, where this agenda is going, and also about them just openly announcing that they make fake bin Laden videos.